In this episode, we're going to talk about 4 principles that my wife and I discovered while being foster parents that if you can master, will make your foster parenting journey so much easier. So, unfortunately, my wife and I learned the hard way these 4 principles. We had to learn them as we went, but the reason why I want to share them with you is if we would have mastered these 4 principles early on or had them mastered before we even started being foster parents, it would have made our journey a whole lot easier. And so these principles are going to sound relatively easy in principle, but in practice are much more difficult than most people can imagine. So let's get right in it. Principle number 1. You must have excellent communication between you and your partner. Now, that seems like a no-brainer, and I would guess that if I asked most married couple or most couples that are dating or have been dating for a long time, they would say, yes, we have really good communication. But what I have found is when you peel the onion back, the communication isn't as great as they think it should be or it's not even as good as they think it is. So one of the ways you can tell if you have excellent communication is, can you talk about something to your partner that you know will upset them, but you still have the conversation, and at the end of the conversation, you may not agree with each other, but you're still good. One of you is not sleeping on the couch, one of you is not mad, one of you is not taking your clothes and throwing it out the window. Basically, you still like each other at the end. And again, many of us are brave enough to say things to our partners, but we can't say in a way that our partners will receive it, be able to process it without anger towards us or frustration towards us. And even when you have excellent communication, there may be some anger, there may be some frustration, but it will end a lot better. Let me give you an example of what excellent communication looks like. My wife and I had adopted the girls, and about a year later, we received another placement of 3, which then turned to a placement of 2, and we had them for about a year. And the county had come to us at about the 1-year mark and said, would you be interested in adopting these 2 children? So my wife and I sat down to talk about it, and her stance was, we cannot adopt these children. My stance was, absolutely, we can adopt these children. So can you imagine that? I mean, my wife says we can't adopt them. I say we can. Well, here's what was going on. So my wife and I are Christians. And so financially, we could support 2 more children. Mentally, we could support 2 more children. We could do everything from a logistics point of view to support 2 more children. What I didn't tell you is that these children were creating some triggers for our now adopted children because it was reminding them of what they had gone through over the so many years that they were in foster care system. And so to some degree, it wasn't fair to them. But at the same time, they did not want us to disrupt because they didn't want us to do what other people had done to them. And so this put them in conflict. They didn't really want them here, but they didn't want them to go because they were concerned about where they would go and would they go to a safer home. And so that created some real chaos for our 2 adoptive daughters. And they didn't want to feel that way, but as we all know, sometimes we feel a way and we don't really want to feel that way, but we can't help how we feel. We can help how we act, but we can't help how we feel. And so they were acting with kindness and compassion, but feeling some real tension inside. And so I was coming at it from, we can do this. And my wife was coming at it from Mama Bear protecting our two children. And I totally get it. And she was right and I was right. And so how did we deal with this? Well, one of the ways that Katie and I deal with things like this is we take long walks. So there is a park near our house that has a 2.5 mile loop on it that goes through the woods, and it's really pretty. And so we decided that we would go to the park and we would walk and we would talk about this. And I will tell you, lap one, there was a lot of yelling, there was a lot of screaming, there was a lot of arguing with each other. We didn't like each other at the end of lap one because we were both arguing our side, which is the way we work through conflict. Lap two, we started listening and started to understand where each other's point of view were coming from. So I was listening to my wife, understanding she was being mama bear. My wife was listening to me, understanding that I felt like as a Christian, this was our obligation. And so we really started to really listen and really understand where the two of us were coming from. And so we could start to process it. And lap three, we basically came up with a compromise, and we came up with a great compromise. We came up with a compromise that was good for her, a compromise that was good for me. Basically, our compromise was we were not going to adopt them, but we would never let them leave our family, meaning we were always going to be a part of their lives. And so that was the compromise. So that was hard. It took 7.5 miles, right? And about 3+ hours to get there. And it wasn't fun. None of it was fun. But we had learned how to communicate with each other. Sure, were we arguing and fighting on that first lap? Absolutely. But we weren't giving up. Lap two was all about figuring out, seeing each other's point of view. And lap three was compromise. And so that, because you have great communication, doesn't mean that you don't have arguments. We have arguments, but what we do is we never give up. We continue to have conversations until we come up with some resolution that we both can agree on. And so that's what we did. 7.5 miles later, you're going to need to figure out, how do you and your partner do that same thing? How do you overcome those conversations that you don't want to have? All right, so that's the first one. Great communication. The second one is you have to have the ability to completely change your routine. So when you have a foster child, most people have some kind of routine. Even people that live in chaos have typically some kind of routine. For us, we have 5 biological children at the time, and we brought foster children in. They were all in sports. They all were in something. And so we were running 1,000,000 miles an hour. And so our lives were chaotic to begin with. And now we bring foster children in. And when I say some part of your routine is going to blow up, well, for us, it was the schedule. And Katie holds near and dear to the schedule. She knows when somebody's supposed to be where, how they're going to get there, how they're going to get back, how they're going to come home, when we're going to eat dinner, so on and so forth. And all of that completely imploded when we brought foster children in. Why? Because there's doctor's appointments, there's therapy appointments, there's social visits, there's bio visits, there's the list goes on and on and on and on. And so all these new things we had to figure out how to make work. And so something had to change. If you like a really clean house, there's a possibility that part of your routine is going to blow up. If you like to have quiet time between 6 and 8, that may not happen anymore. You can still have quiet time. It just may be at 10:30 at night. And so just understand that your routine and how you run your home is going to change. And you can try to fight it. And the only thing it's going to do is create an extraordinary amount of pain and frustration. So just going in, knowing that your routine is going to blow up, the way you run your house is going to blow up, and you just learn to be flexible. And that's the key, is learning how to be completely flexible. And for some people, this is going to be easy. And for other people, this is going to be extremely painful. But I promise you, if you master this, your journey through being a foster parent will be a lot easier. Third, you cannot rely on your old parenting methods. You have to rely on the training that you've received. And this is hard. Again, remember, we had 5 biological children before we started fostering. And so we had been through it all. We had been through babies and the terrible 2s and 3s, and we'd been through that 4 and 5, and we'd been through that 8, 9, 10, starting to get independent, and then teenage years, and then moving them out. And so we've been through the gambit. And so we thought we had a pretty good handle on parenting children because we'd sort of been through it all. And, we've had challenging children and we have easy children. And so we felt like we had this down. But this is a different world. And there's a lot of challenges. So let me give you a real live example of what I mean by you're going to have to completely change your parenting style. So we had a foster placement, and one of the foster children we caught doing inappropriate things with their phone. And so we took the phone away, not as a punishment, but to keep them safe. Now, they saw it as a punishment, but we took it away to keep them safe. And so through my time of being a foster parent, because we've mostly done 10 and above, so a lot of teenagers, and so teenagers have phones. And so I have learned how to dehack phones and pull deleted and deleted texts and deleted pictures. And I didn't want to know any of this stuff, but being a foster parent, I sort of had to learn how to do it. And so I'd become very savvy. And so one of the things I didn't know is that you could see what devices are on your network. And so I talked to a computer friend of mine, and he said, oh, this is how you do it. And he showed me how to do it on my network. And so one day, so we had taken the phone away in October, maybe September, October. And around the beginning of January, I was looking at my network and noticed there was a new iPod showing up on our network that didn't belong to anybody. The IP address was not one that I recognized. And so I started searching, and sure enough, I found this iPod in the child's room that had their device taken away from them. And so I put it back, and when the child came home, I told the child, I said, I noticed that there was an iPod on the network. Is that yours? And if it is, please go get it and bring it to me. And so that child did, and I appreciate that child did it. And so the child brought it to me, and I did all the dehacking, and I searched through the deleteds, and I found nothing but typical, appropriate teenage conversations. So nothing inappropriate. So the next thing I did was I took the iPod and I handed it back after I had done all that work, handed it back to the foster child and said, thank you for not doing anything appropriate. And that was it. So that in our world was totally different, because if that would have been one of my bio children, I would have been like, you knew better. You knew you weren't allowed to have an iPod. You knew, I can't believe you were sneaky. I can't believe you did this behind my back. And da 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 da, and on and on and on and on and on. And you can imagine, right? And they would have caught, a lot of grief for doing that, and there would have been additional punishment because they went around me. So why is it that all I did with my foster child was to say, thank you for not doing anything inappropriate? Well, here's what you don't know. This particular foster child always was looking for us not to love them. And we had to be very careful with discipline to show them that we love them, because they were always waiting for us to quit, and they were always waiting for us to to show them ways that we don't love them. And so relationship was way more important. Now, let me be clear. If the child had continued to do something inappropriate, there probably would have been a different consequence. But because the child had because the child had corrected the behavior, there was no reason why I should do an additional punishment. I should show love and grace instead. Now, I can tell you that, again, that's not what I would have done with my bio children. But my bio children know that I love them unconditionally. They never, ever, ever question it. But this child didn't. And so I had to parent differently. Now, many of you are probably asking the question, well, how did my bio children feel about it? Well, they protested to me privately. Like, if I did this, you would have done X. And they are right. And I had to explain to them that we do not parent all of our children the same. And we parent based on the child's needs. And so they didn't like it. And that's okay. They don't have to like it. I don't parent all my children the same regardless. Now, that's a drastic change, but still, that's what I mean by you're going to have to rely on what you learned in the classes. Because again, that's not what we would have normally done. Finally, you cannot do this alone. You must be willing to ask for help. Now, for my wife, this was very difficult because my wife's attitude was, we got into this, we did this is our problem. Anything that happens is our problem and we need to do this, right? I'm going to just tell you right now, foster parenting is not an individual sport. It's a team sport. It requires a team. This is an awful lot. If you go into it thinking that this is an individual sport, it's an awful lot like playing baseball as an individual player. I guess you could do it, but it would be very difficult. You could pitch the ball and then, in theory, run way to the outfield real quick and hopefully catch the ball before it lands. But it is very difficult. This is a team sport. But here's the thing you need to remember. When you don't allow other people to help, you take something away from those folks also. Not everybody can be a foster parent, but lots of people want to help. And so not allowing them to help is taking joy from them, which in return takes stress away from you. So what gives them joy takes stress from you. So what does that look like? Well, when you get a new foster placement, if somebody says, hey, let me bring you a meal, let them bring you a meal. If they say, hey, I'd love to cut your grass, let them cut your grass. If they say, what can I do to help? Say, you know what? It would be great if you just did X or if you did Y. Allow other people to come on this journey with you. This is a critical part of being a foster parent. Building a team of people around you that are going to walk with you through this journey is critical because I promise you're going to need them. Because again, I can't say this enough. This is a frustrating journey. The most rewarding journey you'll ever do in your life, but frustrating at the same time. And you are going to need people. And as much as you want to think you can do this on your own, and you can, you're just not going to do it as well as if you allow other people in. So I can't stress enough the importance of allowing others to walk on this journey with you. So there you have it. The principles. Excellent communication between you and your partner. The ability to change your routine and the way you run your house. You can't rely on your old parenting methods. And you can't do this alone. You need a team around you. If you master those 4 things, I promise you one thing. This journey of being a foster parent will be way more fulfilling than if you don't. And so my suggestion is, as as you are waiting to receive your first placement, you need to work on these things. And again, some of these are going to come natural for some of you. Some of you are going to be like, oh, asking people for help, that's not a problem at all. I do that all the time. This is going to be easy. Great. But maybe changing the way you parent is going to be very difficult. But understand, you're going to have to take out everything that around that child into consideration as you parent. And yes, if you have bio children, they're probably going to protest, and you're going to have to be okay with that. So again, I hope you really enjoyed this. I hope you found this useful. If you did, please subscribe. I am constantly creating videos to help you and your foster parenting journey.